I'm excited to talk to not one, but two of our awesome Union of Concerned Scientists team members today. Dr. Angel Fernandez-Bou is a Western States senior climate scientist here, and he works closely with Western States energy analyst Vivian Yang. They're both neck deep in how we can use clean, renewable energy to transform the way our society functions. Today, we're going to tackle agrivoltaics and ecovoltaics 101, which already sounds pretty cool to me. So, Vivian, why don't you start us off with just sort of a general background on what agrivoltaics and ecovoltaics even are?
Yeah. So agrivoltaics is the practice of combining crop production and solar energy generation on the same piece of land. So thinking about designs, you could have these solar panels over your crop productions. You could have alternating rows of solar panels and then whatever crops you're trying to grow. Ecovoltaics is a very similar concept, but in some ways a much broader definition of practice of combining ecological benefits into your solar panel production. So whether that's, pollinator habitats or native plant species habitats, just a system that is generating solar, but is also providing these other environmental benefits.
So it's kind of like smushing two concepts together and making them live happily ever after.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking more broadly, just a way to kind of make the most of the land you have.
That sounds really intelligent. And it sounds like kind of a return to the way that people had to live before we had mass convenience, kind of like we do now. So Angel, it sounds like it's a fairly straightforward concept, but I know there's more there beneath the surface. So can you kind of give us some of the scientific information behind the ways that agrivoltaics help protect the environment?
Yes, it's very straightforward. Actually, what Vivian said, no, this is about using the soil in multiple ways. In places like California, soil is so expensive that we need to be smart about how we use our land. So, in the case of agrivoltaics, for example, is combining the crops with the energy generation has some synergies both for the energy generation and for the crops. No, the crops. Can have the benefits in places like here where I live in Merced. It's super hot in the summer. The sun hits really, really hard, and providing shade to the crops, the shade provided by the solar panels, can bring new opportunities to grow new things or to be better at growing things that we are already growing. And it's the same for solar panels. When they are in bare soil, they get very hot, but if they are over a cover crop or some crops that have evapotranspiration, then they will decrease the temperature of the solar panels and they will be more productive. In the same amount of square feet of solar panels, they can produce more energy.
Wow, that's pretty cool, actually. More efficient solar. Hey, who doesn't want that? But so we've seen. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have seen, if they haven't seen them in person, but they've seen pictures or videos of the big fields of solar panels in the middle of open spaces, like way out in the desert. So does having solar panels in and having the agrivoltaics approach in arid locations, does that actually really help farmers? And can you give me some examples of how this might work for real dry areas?
Actually, research tells us that in places that are drier, that are hotter, agrivoltaics works better for farmers because it casts the shade, it protects a lot of the water use, no? Because the shade reduces the transpiration of the plants, so that in some places it reduces up to 40% of the water use of the crops. So that's a really good point in favor of agrivoltaics for farmers in arid regions, no? Because here in California, we know we don't have enough water and we need to think how to use the water that we have in the best ways. And combining different revenue sources like agrivoltaics is a really good way to do it. And you mentioned, for example, deserts. And I mean, obviously, every energy project is controversial. There is no energy approach that I think is not controversial that I can think of. But I think putting solar panels in virgin lands, in protected lands, in deserts, for example, it can create new problems that we don't foresee. For example, we have problems here with valley fever, and removing soils that moving the earth in soils that have been like preserved for a long time can just release spores into the atmosphere. So we don't want to, foster the use of new soils. We have a lot of agriculture here in California. We will need to repurpose about 1 million acres of land. So the part of the land can go to agrivoltaics or ecovoltaics to save water for agriculture and for the people, and also to bring clean energy for everyone.
Okay, and before I ask the next question, Vivian, I think somehow I may have accidentally muted your mic. So I think you have to click the little icon. This is
Oh,
there,
okay.
there we go. There you are. Okay, good, because I'm going to ask you the next question. So
Okay,
anyway,
great.
all right, cool. So we'll pretend this didn't happen. I edit this part out. Okay. So farmers often don't want to change the way they do things unless it makes economic sense, because profit margins for small farms in particular can be so slim. So Vivian, how or does adopting agrivoltaics benefit farmers directly? And if it does, how does it do that?
Yeah, so I think from the guys financial viability of these projects, there are a lot of different methods where incorporating solar can really help a farm's economics. Um, and it's a little complicated because there are so many different, design models, operating models, business models, regulatory factors that go into, what kind of revenue streams that a solar project on your land can bring. So, one of the obvious ones people think about is net metering. And so that's essentially when you are selling your excess electricity back into the grid. Recently in California, those compensation rates were, very much reduced. And so that might make now net metering a less feasible option to have as an alternative revenue stream. But, in agrivoltaics too, you're on a farm, you have high utility bills on your farm, whether that's, refrigeration or heating. And so, having on-site electricity generation can offset a lot of those utility bills, which is great. Another kind of solar project model that people talk about is community solar. And so that's when customers can subscribe to a local project and receive some of those more direct benefits of the solar project via reduced utility rates. And so there are just a lot of different models in which, having local solar generation can help not only the farmers, but also other community members. Um, Thinking about like the actual project itself, you know, agrivoltaics does have a higher capital cost. A lot of times with the designs, you have to raise the solar panels up further, which is going to increase the amount of steel you need to use. Or if you're going to space them out further, that's just, you're not getting as many solar panels than you would in a traditional solar setup. Um, and so those costs are kind of hard to calculate at this point because it is just such different designs and models and how people are implementing agrivoltaics.
So it sounds like there are potential benefits, but we're still trying to figure out all of them. And then if there could be some trade-offs, but then it's like, is the benefit better than the trade-off? And Angel, do you have anything to add to that? Is there some perspective you've got there?
Yeah, I mean, besides everything that Vivian has said, I think the reduction of risk of income, no, having multiple income sources. Besides, I mean, this is for maybe larger installations, but having a diversity of income sources reduces the risk of farmers. And agriculture is very risky, and not everyone has the insurance. And having a second income in the same land is always very useful.
Yeah, I think that especially these days, with all the disasters we see hitting people all over the country and all over the world, having that resilience that from different options is even more important. And then I know, Angel, you've done a lot of work in California Central Valley, and it's a huge food production hub for the United States that a lot of people don't realize. So much of our food comes from Central California, but the area has had conflicts around agricultural water use for decades, and Is that something that agrivoltaics can help with? And are those Central Valley communities, are they set up to benefit from more agrivoltaics use?
Yes. The scale, it will depend on how successful agrivoltaics become, no, but definitely agrivoltaics is something that can be used to benefit communities, and we are seeing it. Some communities that are trying to implement agrivoltaic systems, that they are trying to create an agricultural economy that is sustainable based on agroecology, based on regenerative agriculture, based on a solidarity economy, such as Allensworth is a community in Tulare County. And we see that agrivoltaics can bring a lot of different benefits for the communities. And thinking more at the system level, maybe uh, just reducing the agricultural demand in general will bring benefits, water security for nearby communities, because a lot of the water that we use in California is pumped from the ground. No, a lot of farms depend on groundwater, but also many disadvantaged communities, many domestic wells also depend on the same groundwater, and they are competing for this scarce resource here in California. And agrivoltaics can reduce the amount of water that a farm uses. Now, if you do that near a community, you can bring more water resilience to the community. You can also maintain your aquifer levels more stable, meeting the legislation. So that will also lead to maybe reducing the amount of land that we have to repurpose, because we will have to repurpose a lot of land.
Right. So that's actually kind of exciting to think that this technology can help us, and this application of this technology can actually help us reduce that groundwater burden that we put on our aquifers these days. And California, like, water is life, just like everywhere else, but this state has so many different regions and produces so much food that the arid regions are asked to produce food, which is, we don't just have rainforests where we can grow things. So it's a bit of a challenging place, and but it's very essential to national security. We have to have food security to have national security. So there's a lot of implications. But Vivian, I know we've been talking quite a bit about California. I'm hoping that maybe you can give us some other areas in the country where people are starting to use agra and ecovoltaic solutions. Do you know of any?
Yeah. Well, so like even outside the country, I feel like a lot of agrivoltaics innovation happened in Japan, which is, a very land scarce country. In Europe too, a lot of countries have had a lot of innovation in agrivoltaics. Within the US, I know Colorado has done a lot. I was able to visit years ago an agrivoltaics farm called Jack's Solar Garden that was, providing local or food to a local co-op, um, providing electricity to the grid, and then also just acting as a research center so different universities could look at the impact of solar shading on their crops. And I know too, the state has had some regulatory movement to kind of provide a little more guidance and regulatory certainty to help implement these agrivoltaics projects. I believe in the Northeast, there's also been some movement in agrivoltaics. I think, California in some ways is maybe a little behind, but given that it is such a big agricultural food production site, and then also, we are planning on heavily relying on solar to reach our clean energy goals, I think it is a really good state where a lot of agrivoltaics can happen.
That's actually kind of interesting because, in some areas, California is such a leader with a lot of tech-based solutions to problems, and then also with like our clean air standards, we're pretty much the leaders. And so it's a nice point to note that, yeah, other people are leading the way on this, and California can learn stuff from them. But yeah, the potential is totally there. We get so much sunshine in this state that it would be silly not to make use of it. But you did mention Europe, and that gets my attention because, as a lot of my friends in Europe like to point out, they don't get as much sunshine. How effective are agrivoltaics projects in areas with not like no sunshine, but like limited sunshine compared to a place like California or Florida or Montana? Is it still effective?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know too much about the European situation. In Germany, though, that is a big agricultural hub, and I believe their weather is not always as sunny as California. But like even within California, along the coast, where it is very foggy, I live in San Francisco, very foggy, but I know up in Humboldt County as well, they have plenty of solar projects that, do get a lot of cloudy days and are still very effective at supporting the grid.
See, that's interesting to me because obviously one of the long-standing arguments against adopting solar technology has been what happens when it's not sunny. So it's good to know that yes, people are using solar in general, but also the agrivoltaics approach in areas that aren't as notoriously sunny as California, Southern California in particular. But so I know, Angel, you've done a lot of on the ground work. And I personally know farmers and ranchers who are opposed to solar and wind projects, and they believe renewable technology does more harm than good. Have either of you, and then this is, from whatever your personal or professional experience is, have you seen much resistance to or excitement from farmers on the ground about this new way of farming?
Well, in my opinion, there is a lot of interest to understand what's going on because, I mean, as you said, no, farmers need also their economic resilience, and anything that can bring them less risk or even a new source of income or savings is good for them. And we see a lot of solar panels around here, maybe for, you know, wells, agricultural wells, so they can save thousands of dollars just because with a few solar panels. So I think some farmers are very open to it. Obviously, there is also more, I guess, old-fashioned people that until recently, many people didn't even accept climate change. So those are changes that are taking a while to be accepted. No, it's difficult to explain something at the systems level if not everyone is on the same page. No, but farmers are in general. I mean, they want to provide for their families as anyone else, and they just see anything that threats their use of water as something bad, no, or something that takes power from agriculture because they won't be able to negotiate as well as before. No, when they have more more income, more land. So I understand their perspective. No, but for those who are more trying to think about the future and the current conditions with climate change and even the agricultural markets over the world, they understand there are some risks and they need to adapt. If they don't adapt, they will have more problems. And I think they understand that. And I hope they will start adapting sooner than later.
And how are educational outreach to farmers? How is the efforts to do that educational outreach? How's that going? Is it and are the outreach efforts are they targeting all the different communities that need to hear the message, or is it sort of the approach where they're only thinking about your stereotypical older white male farmer? Are they actually reaching the diversity of farmers that exist out there today?
But I think for outreach, regardless of the background of the person who is reached out, I think for outreach, the most essential thing that you need to understand is trust. When you want to tell someone something that will change their lives, you need to first gain their trust, and it's something that you won't get, from one day to another. It's something that you need to earn with anyone, with disadvantaged communities, with farmers, no matter if they are small, big, they all deserve to trust the person who is advising them to make a change. No, so I think that's the most important thing about outreach. There is many more efforts. I mean, since I moved to California almost 10 years ago, I see how engagement with disadvantaged communities, with the small and disadvantaged farmers, is given more weight with time. No, so I feel that things are improving in that way, but I still think that there is a gap in the trust in general between people and scientists. No, sometimes scientists are a little bit disconnected of what people think, and I feel that's our responsibility to be more approachable, to be better at communicating, and to earn the trust of the people who need to learn from the cutting edge science that will change their lives for the better.
I
I
could
think
not agree more. And oh, go ahead, Vivian.
Oh no, I was gonna, off of that piece on trust, that's also something where I think the solar industry could do better with just engaging with communities, hearing their concerns. I think we think about these like very large scale solar projects kind of just taking over a lot of these rural areas. And a lot of times, there hasn't been a proper process where communities are told about this and able to have their concerns heard and have those concerns addressed. And so I think in terms of building trust, um, yeah, that's something I would also like to see within the solar community, and whether that's or solar industry, and whether that's requires some sort of legislative action to have to require more community benefits agreements, or just a better process in which we can transition to our clean energy future more equitably.
You actually set me up so well for the next question. I love it. Thank you very much, because I actually wanted to ask about policy and policy initiatives, because I know that in the past, people are often slow to make changes without either government promoting something. And in some cases, the government is slow to make changes without people lobbying for those changes. So, what is the state of policy around agrivoltaics and ecovoltaics right now? And I'll throw it to Vivian for this one. And Angel, if you've got a follow up, go right ahead.
Yeah, so I think at this point the policy is pretty sparse. Kind of what I was talking about in Colorado, how there has been movement in terms of guidance and just, providing more certainty so that farmers know if they, want to implement these projects, that there's just more guidance in how it happens. And I think in California, it's that uncertainty is really kind of preventing developers from being willing to invest, and then also preventing some of the financing that could happen. Um, Recently, Prop 4 in California passed that is a climate bond essentially that would provide some, funding for climate resilience projects, clean energy projects. So agrivoltaics is something that could fall there. Um, but, I think even at the basic level of, getting the definition of what is an agrivoltaic systems into, some sort of statutory language would be really helpful.
Yeah. Angel, any more thoughts on that?
Well, I think, I mean, as I was saying before, any energy project is controversial, but there is funding for energy projects. So sometimes, I mean, I agree completely what Vivian is saying, no, but sometimes you can think a little bit out of the box. Instead of calling agrivoltaics, you can call it a solar installation, and it's on a farm, and you also need batteries to recharge that, and then you can get funding for the battery, you can get funding for the solar, you can get maybe some funding for other activities that are related. But it's not easy. No, it takes a long time, especially right now that is kind of starting. It's very difficult to find people who want to do the change, and when they want to do the change, it's very difficult for them to find funding. But that said, I think in the case of agrivoltaics, I think is a really really good solution for small farmers and medium farmers. I think it can bring them, very very good advantages, and more resilience, economic resilience, and water reductions. So I think for them is it would be very good to start considering that, even though there is the need for more support, maybe more research, maybe more outreach. And in the case of ecovoltaics, I think it's a little bit different than agrivoltaics, because ecovoltaics is very similar to a regular solar farm. You just need to implement some best practices that don't cost so much. So in that case, I would say that it's just up to the landowner or the project manager to implement those small changes to make the project much better with ecovoltaics.
So it sounds like ecovoltaics might be the easier thing for people to adopt on an individual level. And then agrivoltaics might need some more support. And whether that's from the communities asking for it, from the government incentivizing development. But it sounds like there's more that we can do here. There's more advocacy that is open to us. Is UCS as an organization doing anything to push this forward? I know you two authored a really neat report about agrivoltaics and ecovoltaics a few months back, but are we doing anything directly on the advocacy side that you're aware of?
Actually, so I just wanted to go back really quickly and talk
Yeah.
about, in terms of the policy, Angela mentioned more research is needed. And last year or 2 years ago, there was a bill introduced that would have set up pilot projects, demonstration projects. And I think that is like a critical piece that is needed. Like I mentioned, you know, agrivoltaics, in some ways, like the proof of concept is there. So many countries, states have implemented it, but it also is regionally specific in that, what crops you're growing, what the local climate is. And so I think more research specific to California is really important in kind of laying that foundation to get more projects online. That bill did not go through, unfortunately, although UCS did support it. So there was a little bit of advocacy there.
Yeah. Do we have anything else in the works? I mean, if not, that's okay too. But do you know of anything that we're doing?
I don't know of anything as of now.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, and Helen and I are trying to stay up to date in what's going on, and in some ways just waiting also for the next legislative session to see what comes up.
So one of the things that we are trying to do is to support disadvantaged communities, small communities, small groups, community-based organizations to showcase that the solutions that we propose work. No, and one of those communities is Allensworth in Tulare County, and I've been working with them for several years. And Vivian has also joined the group, and we have been engaging in multiple things. No, Allensworth has an amazing plan for the township. Is the first Black community created in California more than 100 years ago, and they have suffered from so much sabotage and systemic racism and a legacy of many structural problems that even though they don't exist today, that legacy still persists. No, and the community has been fighting and fighting for decades. They have several community members, community leaders that are wonderful, and they have this holistic view of Allensworth, how to bring resilience and prosperity and happiness to people in Allensworth. And they are thinking about creating this agroecology hub, and inside the agroecology hub, they will create agrivoltaics, and the agrivoltaics will provide energy sovereignty to the community. And basically nowadays they depend on PG&E, and their electricity goes back and forth, and they have cuts, like they were saying, every other day. Every time they don't have electricity from PG&E, they in a few hours they lose the water because all their water is pumped. So the community doesn't have water if they don't have electricity. No, so in this case, energy security is water security, and they want to bring that and be controlled by them with a microgrid that is inside their agroecology hub. So Vivian and I have been working with them, collaborating, trying to help whenever we can at the systems level, not only with agrivoltaics, but with anything that we can, because they are such an inspiring community to mirror, to be a role model for many other places. No, because if they can succeed after all the sabotage that they have experienced for 100 years, then anyone can succeed, no, in California and outside California. And part of our advocacy is to show that communities like Allensworth can, move forward and be more resilient, be happier, increase their quality of life, in part thanks to agrivoltaics, but it's in fact thanks to the community itself, thanks to the amazing leaders, thanks to their pure understanding, their deep understanding of their situation and the potential solutions to bring. And agrivoltaics is one of them.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I was just going to say, agrivoltaics isn't, going to get us to our California's clean energy goals. But I think the really important piece of agrivoltaics is that it's kind of designed to help, local communities find solutions that work for them. And so, it's going to contribute to the clean energy. But I think more importantly, what it contributes to is community resilience. And I think that's why it is just a very cool piece of the clean energy puzzle.
That makes a lot of sense. So now we'll skip to the last one about the technology, which was okay. I'd like to look to the future for just a minute. Our global population is still growing, and people are consuming more and more. And whether that's directly like food product consumption or other crops like corn that have non food applications as well. So it makes me wonder, does agrivoltaics have the potential to help optimize food production as we navigate our 21st century challenges?
Well, as Vivian is saying, agrivoltaics is not going to be the solution by itself to food security or to a clean energy transition, but it can help. When I think about agrivoltaics, I think about small farmers, communities that are together investing on idea, and this idea is bringing them some positive outcomes. No, and in the case of agrivoltaics, if you think, for example, about multiple small farmers adopting this will bring more um, diversity to their crops, no, and that will bring more diversity to the local markets, and that will bring more diversity to their diet, which means more food and nutrition security. So in the case of agrivoltaics, it can also save water, so maybe you can produce a little bit less, but you can produce in higher quality, because agrivoltaics also covers the soil with the shade that promotes beneficial microbes that bring more nutrients to the plants, so the plants can themselves be more nutritious. And at the end of the day, in California, we have a lot of problems with food and nutrition security, and farm workers are some of the people who are most affected in our state. And it's not because they are not surrounded by food, it's what we call a food apartheid, is they don't have access to the food, even the food that they produce, right? Because they don't have grocery stores, or because sometimes they don't have the money to pay for it. So if we bring more local production, maybe community gardens, we can implement community gardens. One of our also advocacy work is with Fireball. It's a small community in West Fresno, and we are working with them in in the community garden, and we have a project with a small array of solar panels in the community garden to prove also agrivoltaics, to show to the community how agrivoltaics work. And it's very small scale, but it's to raise awareness. Maybe someone will one day become a small farmer and will implement those agrivoltaics, and then they will can grow, be able to grow more diversity of crops, because they will have the sun and they will have the shade and they will have the different temperatures, and that brings more diversity also for their crop production.
That is super cool. I had no idea that UCS was doing that, and I work here. So that's awesome. Okay, well, we are nearing the end, and our last question here on This Is Science is always a two-part question, and we're going to start. I'm going to have Angel answer the first part, and Vivian, you're going to get the second part. So the first part, it sounds a little bit dire and a little bit broad, but Angel, we are the Union of Concerned Scientists. Why are you concerned?
Wow, this is a broad question. One of my main concerns is to not be able to communicate people facts, scientific facts, the reality, so we all are in the same baseline. So I don't see it as responsibility of the people. I see a responsibility of us scientists that are not being good enough at communicating our work. And maybe we have to go out of our comfort zone and talk to people we don't want to talk, and maybe become friends with people we didn't think would become friends, so we can have some trust, and with that trust we can chat and listen, especially listen, but also talk about how things are, how we see science, and how science can help us all, right? And but having the same baseline with everyone, we're trying to serve here everyone with our science, no, but we need to be maybe more um, aware of how, or what is the best way to communicate our science, so people will be able to digest it and to trust it, And I think that would be a fantastic outcome. That would make me less concerned.
That's great. And so, Vivian, the second part of the question is designed to be a little more optimistic. And so, you have your own concerns. You're here, and but we are a group of people that we don't just sit around and act concerned. Like we actually do things. And so, I wanted to know, what are you doing about your concerns right now?
Oh, I mean, I think, I don't know how I want to answer this. Um, I mean, working at the Union of Concerned Scientists feels like a big part of how I am addressing these concerns. 40 hours a week, I feel like I work at something that I find really fulfilling and meaningful and impactful. And so I think that is really cool. And, in my job, I engage in a lot of different spaces. So, thinking of the coalitions I work in too, and just hearing the passion and the work and effort so many people are putting into in my space, the clean energy transition is really inspiring. And so I think, in I guess that professional context, yeah, this is what I'm doing. I am acting on my concerns. I think, in maybe a personal context, and I don't know if that's where this question was intended to go. I love talking about clean energy with my friends, and a lot of them are in similar industries or in, also working at clean energy from different angles too, which is really interesting. So whether it's in academia or much more, in depth of the Bay Area, so a lot of tech people. So, how technology can also enhance the clean energy transition. And so it's great. We'll go on bike rides and spend, 2 hours just chatting about the different work we're doing, different work streams we're doing. So I find that, just finding ways to engage with people, friends, or just others who might not, be aware of what's happening and why it's important, often because they are focused on other things that are also very important. But communicating and engaging, I think that's how I address all the concerns I have.
And I
Well,
think
go
that
ahead, Anja.
many of us at UCS, many of us at UCS are also volunteers in our free time. No, I know. I mean, many of us. Some of these advocacy projects that we have at UCS now is because some of us started talking to communities, community friends, and we became friends with community leaders. And after years, they ask us for something, and it happens that UCS is interested, and especially to not be extractive. When we talk about communities, not to just do it for ourselves, but do it in a way that serves the communities. And we do a lot of volunteer work beyond our work at UCS. Many of us.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the most important things is if somebody is in this line of work, we're here because we love it, not because we're going to get rich, not because we're going to get famous. It's because this matters to us all on a professional and a personal level. So I want to thank you both so much for coming on the show and sharing your expertise and giving us that basic background in this pretty cool new way of using technologies and fusing opportunities together for the future. So thank you both.